let's talk about courtroom attire. Hey everyone, welcome to Legalbytes. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we explain the law one bite at a time. So courtroom attire is one of my favorite subjects, and it is not just because I am basic AF and I own it. Yes, I do love a good pumpkin spice latte. Yes, I do love a good pair of Ugg boots, and I love kittens and I love puppies and all that great stuff. But the other reason why I love talking about courtroom attire is because it's all about communication, very subtle communication, and the ways in which a legal team or a party or even a witness could convey some kind of a particular message to the jury without actually saying it. Now, I've talked about this quite a bit in the past through the live streams covering the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard defamation trial, where the parties and the attorneys for the parties really have very few opportunities to talk directly to the jury. And typically there are a number of stereotypes that a party needs to either combat or sometimes play up to the jury. Men will have certain stereotypes, women will have certain stereotypes, race, religion, all of these things can have preconceived notions attached to them, and those can be sort of filtered out through the jury selection process. But it's really, really difficult to actually stamp them out. Even if somebody gives some kind of a response saying, I'm not particularly biased one way or another, or, I can set aside my biases. Let's be real. We're talking about human beings here, and all human beings do have some level of preconceived notions. And so because of the fact that the parties and the attorneys don't necessarily have the ability to communicate directly to the jury about these stereotypes in particular, one of the ways to address that is through various mechanisms, either through dress, makeup, hair, or even different communication styles, different vibes, different ways of sort of setting themselves up within the courtroom. There are things that the parties and the attorneys can do here to try to convey certain messages in a subtle, unspoken way. Now, in this particular trial, some of the ways that the parties have been communicating is not just through the dress of the two parties and of their attorneys, but also through the various things that they've been doing. As an example, Johnny Depp has had candy on the desk between himself and Ben Chew. We've seen Ben Chew kind of sneaking a piece of candy from Johnny Depp. We've seen different types of drinks out on the table that people might speculate or talk about at various times. And outside of this trial, I have even heard of a case where it was either a personal injury, wrongful death case, or it was like a murder case where someone essentially had died. There was a purported victim in the case. And so on either the plaintiff side or on the prosecution side, basically the non-defense side, what they did throughout the trial was they had a very large black duffel bag that was stuffed and sat right by the desk or the table of their particular side. Never any explanation for it, never any attention called to it, but it was there every single day. And the suggestion was this is possibly or at the very least a representation of the victim. Now, that's a very extreme example of something that can happen to sort of draw attention to that aspect of the case. But that is something that sometimes attorneys can kind of turn to. Whether you feel okay about that or not is, maybe another thing. But that is sometimes the sort of things that can be brought in without being brought in through evidence, if that makes any sense. If you were to use that kind of a devious example in this particular case, we could say that it would be very interesting if all of the women on Johnny Depp's legal team on the day of the closing arguments decided to wear red nail polish and have tissues out at some point, even just on the desk, not necessarily using them, but having them on the desk and having red nail polish as a reference to the allegation that Amber Heard showed that she had some kind of a bloody nose through a tissue, and that it turned out that it was actually red nail polish. But anyway, the focus of this video is more about the actual fashion involved in this case. Stereotypes are unfortunate, but they are unfortunately real. And as I said before, courtroom fashion can be used to either combat certain stereotypes or combat certain messages, or to play to certain stereotypes or to convey a particular message. Will the fashion decisions of each party end up making that much of a difference as to how the jury ends up deciding? I don't know, maybe. Ultimately, I would like to think that it's the evidence in the case that is going to make a difference no matter what. But these kinds of things can have an impact on a jury where they are maybe on the fence one way or another. Now, as a general matter, typically when going into court, there's a certain level of decorum that is expected. Fashion should be a little bit more conservative, should be a little bit more buttoned up, and it should be basically understated and as clean as possible. I know that today we live in a society where people can increasingly dress however they want and present themselves to the world however they really feel as authentic as possible. However, when it comes to court, we are playing to the most mainstream parts of society as possible. And that's because, like it or not, courtroom fashion is really about risk. The jury is typically made up of 12 people. In Virginia, in this particular case, it's less than that, but still, you kind of get the picture. And as I mentioned before, during jury selection, the attorneys do try to get to people's biases as much as possible. But those questions and that process is very limited, and the ability to try to really understand how these different individuals think is very difficult to do within the constructs of that jury selection process. So basically, the courtroom dress kind of needs to play to the most plain, vanilla, mainstream attitudes that you will find in that particular population where the jury comes from. For women, that often means dressing a little bit more traditionally feminine. For men, that means often dressing a little bit more traditionally masculine. Dressing your age is also very important. And generally speaking, dressing in something that is not too revealing or flashy, but is still clean and put together. That's usually the general advice for anyone coming into a court setting. Now, for men, this usually means coming in some kind of a suit and tie. It's pretty simple, which is common for men's fashion generally. It's really not that complex of an issue as it can be for women, and we'll get to that in a second. Now, we can all say that that is unfair to women. However, you can also say that that's the flip side of the fact that the red carpet Oscars fashion show is usually way more interesting when you're watching the women's gowns rather than the different celebrities' tuxes. That tux. You know, you can kind of find some things that are a little bit different across several guys. It's usually when you have someone that's wearing something really off the wall, like that one Justin Bieber suit that he was wearing that was like way too big for him and super boxy. I can't remember what event that was, but it was weird. See, you get those like random things like that pop out. But otherwise, generally speaking, it's like, hey, that guy has a tailored suit. Hey, that celebrity also has a tailored suit. It's by Gucci. That one's by something other than Gucci. You know what I mean? Okay, anyway, I'm digressing. Let's move on. Anyhow, for women, as it is on the red carpet, fashion is a little bit more complex when it comes to the courtroom. Not by that much, but still a little bit more complex. Part of this, too, can also depend on which courtroom we are talking about. Whether we are in Texas versus California, as an example. California might be a little bit more loose in terms of the types of fashion that can show up, as opposed to Texas, which could be a little bit more conservative. As an example, in California, I would say wearing a pantsuit is probably fine. In Texas, at least what I was instructed when I was in law school in Texas was that generally speaking, you want to wear a skirt suit. Other than that, wearing a low heel is generally what is expected. A little bit more boring than a super sexy 4 or 5 inch heel, but that's generally what you're going for, is not necessarily sexy, but something a little bit conservative. Same thing goes with other possible choices other than a skirt suit or a pantsuit in different jurisdictions, is possibly wearing a dress and a cardigan or a dress and a blazer. Essentially, you know, going as conservative as possible usually is going to be the safest bet. Not wearing too much jewelry is also a good idea. Okay, now let's apply all of this to the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard trial. Now, there are multiple stereotypes that are at play in this trial. Of course, we have stereotypes about men, stereotypes about women, stereotypes about victims, stereotypes about wealth, stereotypes about Hollywood, and stereotypes about celebrity. All of these things that I just identified carry different types of stereotypes, and that is especially true in Virginia. I mean, well, I wouldn't say that Virginians have these stereotypes much more heavily than other places, but I guess when we're talking about the wealth, Hollywood, celebrity kind of aspect of it, in Virginia, that could play very differently than it would in California. Remember, jurors will bring in their preconceived notions about these various things, like it or not. As an example, some of the commentary leading into this trial, and sometimes you'll still hear it echoed around social media, is the fact that this is a trial that is essentially about rich people problems. Generally speaking, those are people that haven't spent too much time looking at this trial or digging into this trial. And usually once they do look into it a little bit more, they get a little bit more of an understanding to understand that it's not just rich people problems. But again, you look at Johnny Depp, you look at Amber Heard, and it's easy for somebody to make that conclusion very quickly if they haven't spent any time on it. Now, because of that whole wealth, Hollywood, celebrity aspect, the number one issue that both of the parties face right off the bat is relatability to the jury. We've heard testimony in this trial about owning islands, going to the Met Gala, filming movies in Australia, all kinds of things like that that are just so different from your average American's life. And I would say different than a lot of people's lives in Virginia. Northern Virginia tends to be a bit more wealthy. It is very close to DC. So you've got a lot of people that are former military professionals, those kind of folks. But it's still a very different world than Los Angeles. Now, the language that the two parties are using while they're on the stand probably is going to be more impactful and will just make more of a difference as to their relatability. However, having that runway kind of cleared for them ahead of time with the way in which they are presenting themselves to the jury is also very, very helpful. Now, the other piece that's important here before getting into the details about the actual fashion choices of the two individuals is that we need to talk about the claims that each party needs to kind of combat by the other party, or the messages that they are actively trying to put in front of the jury about the party. Now, on Johnny Depp's side, he is the international celebrity. He's the drunk and the drug user. He's the monster, according to Amber Heard, who beats his wife mercilessly. Of course, I'm using all of those in quotations because those are all allegations made by Amber Heard. So how does Johnny Depp combat these things? First off, looking clean is a great way to do that, especially when it comes to the drunk and drug user claim about Johnny Depp. Initially, he had his long hair kind of in his face in the first couple days. And that to me was not a great fashion choice, or not a great, I guess, aesthetic choice, because he looked a little bit more disheveled than I would have liked. But once he pulled his hair into a ponytail, it looked much, much better. He looked very clean, and he's kept it very consistent from there as well. Now, facial hair, fine. So long as it is trimmed, it's kept well, it's not looking like it's just growing out super shaggy. His facial hair has looked just fine. Now, every day, Johnny Depp has been dressing up in a suit, 3-piece suit, pretty basic looking kind of thing. It's maybe not a suit that looks obviously like a $10,000 suit. I honestly have no idea how much the suits cost that he's wearing, but they don't exactly scream money. He looks good. He looks clean. He looks well trimmed, I guess you could say, but he doesn't look like he is screaming, "I am wearing my money on my body right now." And each day he's had a different tie. The tie hasn't been anything crazy that has really drawn a lot of attention. Of course, I think on the first day is the day that he had a bee tie. That was interesting, but it didn't look like it was, anything crazy. It looked nice. Every tie that he's had has been pretty basic, I guess you could say, like nothing crazy, nothing super attention grabbing, like I said. In other words, the tie has never had so much flair that it's been like a distraction for anyone, including the jury. Now, another thing that Johnny has is a lot of tattoos, and he has covered up most of them. He still has some on his hands and whatnot, but he's been able to cover up most of them. Generally a good thing, because tattoos are also something that people will have a lot of opinions of. Maybe generally speaking, those opinions culturally as a whole in the United States have been changing over time, I suppose. But again, you still want to be playing to the most mainstream mayo on white bread kind of attitudes about a lot of these fashion choices. And this isn't to say anything about tattoos that they are inherently going to be bad, or that they are inherently bad, but rather it's just the idea that you don't want to run the risk of turning someone off before they have had a chance to listen to the words that come out of your mouth. So having tattoos like that, being able to cover them up, is generally going to be a good thing. So that you just kind of prevent that possibility that someone's going to use that as an excuse not to listen to you. Now, Jewelry, I would typically say no, particularly for men, other than like a wedding ring would be pretty basic. Maybe like one necklace or something like that if it's like a very particular one. But generally speaking, I would say jewelry on men is not going to be a good idea. In this particular case, though, Johnny's rings that he's had on his fingers on both hands every single day is fine. Number one, he also is a little bit different because of the fact that he is an international celebrity. And there's zero chance, okay, maybe like 1 or 2% chance that any single juror on the jury doesn't know who Johnny Depp is. I would really, really wonder how that happened. But honestly, like the reality is that they probably know who he is anyway. And they know that he has a little bit of an eccentric kind of character. So they would probably be able to sort of suspend a little bit of the common sort of mainstream fashion choices for a few small things for someone like Johnny Depp because of the fact that he is so different and people expect him to be different somewhat as well. So in this case, the rings fall within that range of eccentricity that I think would be allowed. And also the rings are an important factor in this particular case. And that's because, as of course, if you've been following this trial, you know that Amber Heard has alleged that Johnny has smacked her, hit her, backhanded her, punched her in various ways. And if it turns out that he actually wears those rings every single day, chances are the jury will notice through his daily use or wearing of those rings throughout the trial and kind of start to wonder about that. To say, you know, if he did, in fact, backhand her during this incident, and then we see a photo of Amber Heard and things don't look like how I would expect someone to look after being backhanded by someone with those rings on their hand, that is the kind of thing that can play into the favor of Johnny Depp. So having that daily reminder for the jury that, yeah, he wears these all the time, including during all of these alleged incidents, is very, very helpful to him. Now, aside from all of that, one thing that I would say has been generally good, aside from the few things in the beginning that I think needed to be corrected, he looked a little disheveled at the beginning, and then he cleaned up, and then he's been, since then, is very consistent. Now, this is one of the big things that I think is very good on Johnny Depp's side. So he's basically been communicating through his dress that he's been pretty boring and consistent, all things considered. Also, his clothes don't speak of an attempt to impress them with his wealth. Rather, it shows an understanding of the appropriateness of the venue that he's in, and also having a certain level of respect as someone who has the money to pay for a nice suit, that he's going to come in with something that looks respectful of all of the people around him and the process that he's in. Okay, so that is Johnny Depp. Then there is Amber Heard. Now, she has given us a lot more to talk about, and in part, it's because it seems that either she or someone around her who has been helping her make these decisions has not exactly understood the assignment. Now, every lawsuit like this has two different types of courts, and we've talked about this a lot on my channel. There is the court of public opinion and the court of law. And in a case like this, it is undoubtedly true that there will be messages that are intended for the court of law, and then there are messages that are intended for the court of public opinion. For Amber, the court of public opinion really has to do with her being an activist in the Me Too movement, her being an ACLU ambassador, all of these kinds of things that she has really presented herself as over the last few years. And in the court of law, the message that she really should be going for is that she is a victim of domestic violence. She's someone who has been essentially treated like a rag doll by Johnny Depp, and that she is someone who is capable of having been harmed in the ways that she alleges by someone like Johnny Depp. Now, her earlier outfits especially seemed to indicate that she was dressing more for the court of public opinion than the court of law. And actually, I would say that with the exception of day one, when Amber showed up with, I think it was a very light gray suit. She had, her hair was quite messy. She had some really big dark eyes or dark circles under her eyes. And she really kind of looked like a mess. And I don't know if that was put on or if that was very sincere. There's a very good chance that she may have actually had some pre-trial anxieties that kept her from sleeping the night before, that kept her from being able to come looking fresh the next morning. But it didn't help that her hair was also kind of a disaster and that she was wearing a suit that looked like it didn't fit. It also kind of looked like it was brand new and she hadn't really worn it. All of these things just made it look like she was very uncomfortable, which, given the position that she's in, is understandable. Regardless of what you think about Amber Heard, she is in an uncomfortable position. But it also wasn't a good look because it didn't fit into the overall general advice to come in with something looking clean and put together. So then after that, she came to court in an outfit that I like to call Dr. Elsa Schneider. Now, I don't know if you've seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. If you haven't, I would highly recommend it. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. And also I would wonder what you're doing with your life if you haven't seen it. But aside from that, anyway, I'm assuming you've seen it. And if you have, then you know who Dr. Elsa Schneider is. She is a beautiful and intelligent woman who starts off being kind of a love interest for Indiana Jones, but as it turns out, she is also a Looney Tunes evil Nazi who has not just slept with Indiana Jones, but also with his father.
How did you know she was a Nazi? She talks in her sleep.
Anyway, that last tidbit, I guess, is a little bit irrelevant here. Maybe, I suppose, possibly. But anyway, the point here is that you don't really want that kind of a comparison to be made, in my opinion. But for whatever reason, Amber decided that it was a fantastic idea to come into court wearing what looked like kind of like a buttoned up military kind of outfit. Maybe she thought that she looked super strong and like this femme fatale kind of thing, like she was going in to slay a dragon. But that's not the look that you want for the jury when you are coming in as a purported victim of DV. It is just too strong. It's too intense. And what you need to go for is something that is a little bit softer. Anyway, then she got a little bit better. She got a little bit softer, but it still wasn't great. It still was really not great because she came in dressed as what I would like to call Darth Leia. She had a very feminine braided updo, which looked beautiful. However, she had an outfit that was all black and it was very, very severe looking. Now, those two outfits in particular, especially back to back right after one another, are just too severe. And this is especially true when she had the Darth Leia look when her former personal assistant, Kate James, was testifying through video deposition, but still testifying nonetheless, to all the ways that Amber Heard was mistreating her throughout her employment for Amber Heard. So it just was a bad, bad look, along with that and Amber's facial expression that looked very cold and very distant during this time. And I mean, both of those outfits looked like they would be perfectly suited to the court of public opinion in a Me Too kind of arena, because it looks like, you know, a strong woman who's not going to take any crap from any man, and who's going to take what's hers, who's going to defend her rights. Like all of those things are good things that a woman can dress up as an independent woman. But this kind of a court setting is just not the correct venue. And look, as a female attorney, I can totally appreciate the desire to look like a strong woman who is out there to change the system. There is a reason why going into depositions, I have a tendency to always wear all black. Skirt, blouse, heels, everything. I want to look like I am a strong, independent woman. But that's because that is my role as a female attorney in that environment. Having the alleged victim dress up that way is not particularly helpful, not in the court, not at that time, especially when that courtroom is trying to figure out whether or not a man who's about your height and maybe has a good, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 pounds on you has committed some serious DV against you. At the end of the day, Amber Heard's team has to try to present her as someone who this could happen to. And they have to present her also as someone who is not there to be dramatic or exaggerative or otherwise attention grabbing. So the extent to which they can present her as someone that, yeah, you could see this kind of thing happening to is particularly helpful for that. And so I will say that for the most part, her outfits in the courtroom since then have gotten better day by day, even if in my opinion, it has been a little bit slow to progress. Now, I know that the other part about her fashion choices, her dress choices, is a lot of people have been pointing out her choices and showing that they have maybe been mirroring Johnny Depp's choices from the previous day. Or if not Johnny Depp, then Dr. Curry or one of Johnny's female attorneys. These are all different choices that people have sort of pointed to. And I will say that some of them, yeah, they look pretty compelling. That B tie in particular looks pretty compelling. The fact that Johnny on the first day wore a B tie, the next day Amber wore maybe not that exact same B tie, but one that looks very similar. It's weird. I will admit it. It is very weird. And it could very well be that Amber is trying to use that as an intimidation tactic for Johnny. Or maybe she also is using that to play to the court of public opinion to try to give people something to talk about. That is also a very real possibility. Now, the other thing that people have noticed about Amber Heard is her choices in hair. And this is something that, generally speaking, men usually don't have to worry about. Johnny has to a little bit because he's got some longer hair. But for women, it can be a bit more of a topic of interest. Now, when I was talking about the general idea of presenting yourself in the courtroom, I didn't talk about hair. So I'll just say that now. Generally speaking, the simpler, the better. Either for women's hair, either keeping your hair down, simply making it look clean, or having a low bun at the back is usually going to be something that is relatively preferred. Nothing too fancy, nothing too crazy, nothing to distract the jury from the testimony. And applying that idea to this particular case, remember that we are still talking about a potential anti-Hollywood, anti-celebrity, anti-wealth bias. And looking at Amber Heard every single day, just about every single day, she's come in with some kind of beautifully stylized hair. Under normal circumstances, I actually really like her hairstyle choices. I love the braided updo that she's had. I have sometimes had my hair in that kind of a similar braided updo before, and I love it. Sometimes it's very comfortable to have. When I was taking the bar exam, I would put my hair into a braided updo to make sure that it was not around me and it wasn't a distraction to me while I was focusing on the exam itself. However, in a courtroom environment, the way in which hers is put together, it looks professionally done. It looks like she's had a hairstylist coming in and doing her hair for her. And this is the kind of thing that, when I was talking about Johnny Depp, his suits were not screaming, "Hi, I have wealth." Having a hairstyle like that is particularly stylized can send a message to the jury that you're saying, "I have wealth. I can pay for a hairstylist to come and do my hair every day at presumably 5 a.m. or whenever it is that she has to be up and then to be ready for court and getting there on time." And the problem with that is, again, that can go back to the relatability of Amber Heard to this jury. It won't necessarily be the case that people on the jury have had a lot of opportunities to get their hair styled up or have their wife or other significant other or sister or mother or what have you had that experience of being able to pay for a stylist on a daily basis. So that is a particular concern that I would have as someone if I were giving any kind of consultation to Amber for her hair for this trial. Now, finally, we have the subject of makeup. Now, of course, Amber Heard's makeup has played a pretty big role in the allegations of this case. She has alleged that she's had many, many bruises over the course of her relationship with Johnny Depp, and that she used makeup in order to cover up her bruises so that people wouldn't be able to see them. Now, as she has been sitting on the other side of the courtroom from the jury, it is unclear as to whether or not the jury can get a clear look at her with her makeup to determine if they can tell how much makeup she's wearing while she's been over there. But at least from what we can see with the cameras in the courtroom, her cheeks do have a tendency to make certain shadows on her face in almost the exact areas where she claims that she had bruising from these various incidents by Johnny Depp. So there is a decent chance that based on the way that her cheeks make shadows and based on the way that she puts on her blush every in the morning, there's a chance that the jury could see her from way far over there and say, "It looks like you have bruises now." And as I mentioned before, on day one, we could see some very dark circles under her eyes, despite the fact that she was wearing some makeup. I don't know if the jury can see that far, but if they can, that can also create some skepticism as to her ability to cover up bruises with her makeup if she cannot cover up the bags under her eyes. Now, of course, now that she has been taking the stand, she has had an even more reduced kind of look on her face. So previously she was wearing more eyeliner, more mascara, that kind of stuff to sort of accentuate her eyes. Now she's been coming in during her direct testimony, and I would anticipate also during her cross-examination. She's sitting much closer to the jury, of course. So now she's not really wearing any eye makeup at all. I personally would suspect that she's wearing some kind of foundation or powder or something because she doesn't look particularly shiny. If you look at me right now, I've got some shine on my cheeks, and it's because I usually don't wear any foundation on a regular basis. I usually just wear maybe some blush because of the fact that I had a lot of bad acne, and I realized as soon as I stopped wearing foundation, all of that finally magically went away after decades of dealing with acne. Anyway, this isn't about me. This is about Amber Heard. The point of the matter is her face doesn't look particularly shiny. So that to me suggests the fact that she probably is wearing some kind of skin foundation or powder or something for that shine. And truth be told, I don't know if the jury is going to be able to tell the difference between the level of makeup that she's wearing on the stand versus the level of makeup that she's wearing when she's on the opposite side of the room. That distance that she's been sitting at could play well for her if the discrepancy is not quite noticeable. And then when they see her up close, they say, oh, you really don't wear that much makeup on a regular basis. Or otherwise, it could be that they noticed shadows on her face that she didn't anticipate because of the way that she was wearing her blush. These are things that we really won't know until this case is over. And if we have a chance to hear from the jurors themselves after they have rendered some kind of a verdict. Anyhow, as you can see, all of these various different choices in fashion, hair, makeup, rings, jewelry, all of these kinds of things can communicate subtle messages to the jury. Whether they are intended or unintended kind of doesn't matter because at the end of the day, you're still sort of presenting yourself in a certain way to the jury that they can evaluate while they are sitting there throughout 6 weeks of trial. But what have you picked up on in terms of fashion, aesthetic, jewelry, hair, etc., through the course of this trial? Let us know in the comments down below. Otherwise, I hope you found this interesting or at least informative. And if you did, I would love it if you'd hit the like button. It does help us with the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can find us when the next video is uploaded and so you can join us on May 16th for the next day of live streaming of the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard defamation trial right here on this channel. See you in the next video.